Hey everyone, it's Spicy Sushi. I think it's time to release a guide over probably one of the most underdog and most not understood, I guess, skills in Path of Exile. This is a project that I've been working on for the past 4 to 5 weeks of my time in Path of Exile, and over about 40 plus hours over the past 4 days working on this guide to bring out to you all. So I've been reviewing development manifesto, reviewing patch notes, and I think I am ready to release what I have. Uh, it is going to be a 3 or 4 part guide. It is going to contain a Google document that'll be accessible from my Discord server, and which will contain a full leveling guide and a full item progression guide. Now, this Google Doc is going to be updated as the days go on. I am not fully done with it, but everything else is finished, and so I do want to go ahead and release what I have so far. And over the next 2 days, I'm going to work really hard to get this Google Doc finally finished. Now, the reason I chose Explosive Trap is because I did a lot of testing with Ice Trap, and I found out that on this budget, on the same budget comparing Ice Trap to Explosive Trap is going to be putting out about 2 to 3 times the amount of damage as an Ice Trap. Now, some people may be perfectly fine with that. It's still playing Ice Trap for the freezing, but personally, I am wanting to just kind of melt these bosses as fast as possible for my farming strategy. And I was not impressed by the damage that I was able to do with Ice Trap on the budget that I had. Now, I do want to go over basically. So this guide is going to contain after this. I'm going to go over why I chose Raider for this, and I'm also going to go over uh, the fact that everyone in this entire league is playing traps apparently. So I'm going to go over how I deal with that and how we are going to deal with that in this guide, the expenses, because of everyone playing traps, there are going to be some very expensive items for this build. There are only 2 uniques that we really need to buy, which is Slave Drivers and Tinker Skin. And for the in-game bossing setup, which is a 6 link and a Slave Drivers, I think that may be incredibly expensive. I'm just not sure. It's really up in the air about how many people play traps, but it's okay. I have spent a lot of time in this game building a budget way to get into the bossing. So I have estimated a maybe 150 to 250 chaos, depending on what certain items you choose. We will be able to do about 6 to 8+ million Cyrus DPS, which is going to be great for most content in the game, besides obviously the feared. Now, I also want to get out of the way that I do not, I don't feel comfortable recommending this guide for new players. Uh, there is like maybe, I don't know, but maybe I am going to be able to present it in a way that is very understandable for new players, but I just don't feel right to kind of, well, the thing is, the game is in a very strange state. The game is, um, I guess the best way I can put it, it's going to be very frustrating for new players to do anything really this league if they want to push red maps. I just see a lot of frustration ahead and um, a lot of struggling, and I think maybe that's with every build, but I think maybe this build has things that may be a little bit too complicated for a new player to understand, and there might be some frustrations along the way. But maybe I present it in a way, like maybe watch the rest of the video, go over my Google document, go over my path of buildings, ask friends maybe, and if you think this is right for you, go ahead and give it a shot. But if I have time, I am going to try to make a saboteur, a very casual saboteur guide for beginners and new players, which will be Ice Trap. And I'm going to try to get that out because it is a breeze to get through the axe with Saboteur, and it is a breeze to do like most content in the game. You just do it much slower, and you are going to do less damage as the game scales on a Saboteur. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into part 2 of this guide, which is going to explain why we play Raider, the mechanics of Raider and how it interacts, the nerfs on Raider and how that affects this build, and then we are going to move into the crafting guide, which is going to have our shopping list and how we're going to self-craft our items to get up to bossing potential. And then we're going to go over the path of buildings, and then I'm going to close by showing you a preview of the Google document that I'm going to be working on the next 2 days. So let's go ahead and move on to that. So I guess the first question would be, why do we pick the Raider Ascendancy instead of Saboteur? Because when you look at Raider, it really does not look like there's anything of value for Trapper. Well, that is until you consider the slave driver's hands. So if we look at these slave driver's hands, the main thing is going to be that our increases and reductions to cast speed are going to affect our trap throwing speed. And if you did not know, Raider is going to get Onslaught. Raider always has Onslaught. There is no conditional besides just having the Ascendancy node. Unfortunately, with patch notes, we lost 50% increased effect on Onslaught, but what we are left with is still 130% increased effect, which is going to be a lot more powerful than Saboteur's trap throwing speed, even after those nerfs. Now we're also going to get ailment immunity, and we are going to get well, we're not getting ailment. We are going to get ailment immunity, but now we have 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments. But we're going to get the other 50%. So Raider, we're going to have elemental ailment immunity, which is going to be really quality of life for this patch. Just an insane amount of quality of life for this patch. But we're also going to get a lot of movement speed from from the onslaught effect. It's not a lot anymore. It's about 32. I think we're getting about 32% increased movement speed now. And we're going to get phasing, which will make it really easy. It's so nice for a trap build to have phasing. Originally, Saboteur, you'll be running up to a pack of enemies, like dodging left, dodging right, throwing traps. You do get the blind as Saboteur, which is really nice. It's really nice for new players to have that blind, because mechanically it's a little bit difficult for them to understand and get into the game. But with Raider, you can just run straight through that pack with your phasing. You just have permanent phasing, so you legit just throw your traps, run straight through, keep running through. Uh, you also get a lot of dodge with Raider while having phasing, so that's also very nice for our defensive layers. Dodge is a very nice mechanic for bossing, and it's one of the strongest defensive layers for bossing. Um, but let's go ahead and go over the problem. So, what is the problem this league with playing traps? Well, everyone's doing it. Uh, okay, I won't say everyone, but it does seem like traps are the option now for Path of Exile in 3.15. I'm just going to be honest, GGG has really dropped the ball on this one. I think that is probably the biggest understatement of all time. Um, but because of the results of this and GG literally stating that traps are going to be a very good choice, um, we really don't know what the prices are going to be. So slave drivers' hands, what I just talked about, they're going to be a very expensive probably and very rare. They were already rare, but with a lot of people trying to get them, I think they might be more common on the market, but I think they'll still be extremely expensive because of the demand. The Vial of Dominance, of course, if you want the slave driver's hands, you get a architect's hand, which to get an architect's hand, let's go ahead and check my notes real quick. You can get it from the chest inside the Tier 3 Incursion Room, the Defense Research Lab, upgraded from the Trap Workshop, and Temple Defense Workshop. You can get an architect's hand. Now, this architect's hand is similar to slave drivers, but we don't have life tap on. Well, basically, architect's hand has life tap. There's no life tap buff, but I guess I'm explaining a bit too complicated. Basically, all of your trap abilities skills are just going to use life instead of mana. So because of that, we don't have to care about our mana at all, and traps are notoriously expensive when it comes to resource spending, and so with having slave driver's hands and having the recovery of tinker skin, you really just don't have to worry about them, and it's so quality of life. And because of that, we can just max out our trap throwing speed and not have any limitation besides our making sure that the boss is triggering those traps. Now, I just went over some pretty scary stuff, right? I just said things are gonna be super expensive. People are gonna be sniping these things. There's gonna be thousands of people competing. But don't worry, I do have a way that we can deal with this. A way that we can get into bossing very early and not have to worry about slave drivers' hands at all. And that is going to be through what I just talked about, the architect's hands. Um, Now the issue is, like I said, uh, traps are notoriously expensive on the mana as you're spamming them, especially with Raider, because with our onslaught effect, we're going to be throwing about 12 traps per second, 10 to 12 traps per second early on. Um, And so there's just absolutely no way that we could sustain the mana cost of that, especially with mana flash changes. But what we can do is we can use Eldritch Battery, because Eldritch Battery and Tinkerskin are a perfect combination because we're getting a lot of ES recovery as long as bosses are triggering our traps. We don't need any form of ES regen or recovery outside of Tinkerskin because of this. And so this is basically how we're going to do it and how we're going to do it on a budget. It does make things a little bit complicated though, because we are going to use an Arcanist brand setup if we don't do a trigger wand setup, which still is going to use mana. But as long as we are making sure that we are throwing our traps on enemies and they are triggering it, we are going to be jumping straight back up to 100% energy shield. All right. Sorry about that, guys. The audio cut out. But as I wanted to say, after we get those Architect's Hands, that 5-link Tinkerskin, as well as the self-craft items, as well as some of the uniques that we're going to talk about in this next section, we're going to be ready for bossing. Now, you can boss earlier than that, for sure, but I would not really recommend it, especially with all the changes, all the flash changes. I think things are going to be quite miserable. GGG has really chosen the best way for us to deal with mechanical difficulty on bosses is just to do more DPS. It's really in a lot of situations it's not about like skill is going to play a massive part, but it's going to be incredibly miserable with Flasks down and with a lot of movement speed nerfs to be in a lot of these boss fights. So we're really just going to have to combat it with DPS, and this is really the best way is once you get this setup that we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and move into the shopping list as well as the crafting guide for our self-craftable items or items that you can just pick up off of trade if you would like to. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our shopping list. So right out of the axe, you're going to want to buy the highest item level opal wand that you can. Now, I believe you can get this from Act 10 from the vendor, or you can just get this on trade, but you want to get one. And you also want to buy quality gems with the physical or fire tag. Now, if they're going to be physical, they have to all be physical. And if you choose to go with fire gems, you have to only choose fire gems. Now, I'm going to have trade links to literally everything I talk about in this next section. So if you want to skip straight to there, you can to the Google Doc. But anyway, what we're going to do is you're going to filter for quality. These get dropped from a lot of mechanics in the game, so these should be all over the market. We're going to vendor gems total with the same tag. Doesn't matter what color, but they have to have the same tag. 40% total quality with a magic wand, and you're going to get yourself back a +1 fire or +1 physical spell skill gem wand. And then you're going to augment it, you're going to regal it, and then you're going to craft spell damage, the highest spell damage that you can. I would not do the Exalted Orb recipe if you have it, just do the one below it, and you're good to go. That will last you until we go to our max boss farming setup. Um, and if you can do this with 2 wands if you want to just go maximum damage early, but I honestly recommend picking up Chernobog's Pillar next as your offhand. It's going to give you a lot of life, and it's going to give you 100% physical conversion once we anoint our amulet. And so I think that is the best choice for our budget setup. It's like usually 1 alchemy orb. It might be like 1 or 2 chaos now in this league. Uh, but it's a pretty great defensive option to get us up until tier 16 maps if we want to map, or it's going to give us some defenses for bosses because it also comes with Enfeeble. But anyway, number 2 on our shopping list, get an item level 75 agate or amber amulet with Elder Influence. So this is the easiest. There are multiple choices, but we're going to start with agate or amber amulet with Elder Influence. Later on, we're going to move on to Warlord. But for now, this is what you want to put on live search or search as soon as you can. All you need is the amulet. Next, while it is white or normal rarity, this is optional, but I do recommend it. I recommend hitting it with some turbulent catalysts or some Nox catalysts, some Noxus catalysts. So once we do that, we have it at 20%. It should only take 4 of either of those catalysts. And then once you have it at 20%, we're going to alchemy orb that. And then anytime you find a harvest, you're going to use your physical or fire reforge rare items on that. And there is a 1 in 12 chance for us to hit tier 1 physical as extra fire. And once we get that, we're going to craft life and just be done. Now, I do recommend maybe if you can, just try to go for maybe some more stuff on it. We're going to be a bit resistance starved in certain areas because of the amount of uniques we run later. So if you can afford to, maybe you make one for now and then try to have one on the side to try to make it better later on. But we get that tier 1 Fizz's extra fire. You can move on to using your Fizz or Fire Reforges on a Warlord Opal Wand. So the Warlord Opal Wand, we're going to be looking for +1 Fizz or Fire with these Reforges. Fizz is extra fire, damage penetrates fire resistance, spell crit, spell damage, any of those. That'll be your upgraded weapon if you can make a better one. Or if you don't want to do that, another upgrade is you could move on to the Warlord Amulet and start using your Fizz or Fire Reforges on that. Now, let's go to our rings. So we're going to use 2 rare rings to start off until we get to our bossing setup, which is going to use a synthesis unique ring, a cheap version of this ring. It's not going to be the super expensive version, but it is going to be a Circle of Anguish with Herald of Ash reservation as well as Herald of Ash buff effect. But until then, we're going to get 2 rare rings and we're going to hit them both. Okay, you want to get them normal rarity. The base really depends on you. You might want to do Amethyst Ring, or you could do Opal Ring, or Two-Toned Ring for now to help with your resistances. I found Two-Toned Ring to be the best option for me, or another resistance base, so we can get those elemental resistances as early as possible. But we're going to have it normal rarity. We're going to use Noxious Catalyst, or we're going to use Turbulent Catalyst, get it to 20%, and then hit it with an Essence of Hysteria, and hit them both with Essences of Hysteria and then just take them. If you want to go higher budget, you could try to keep using Essences of Hysteria. These are normally, it says about 10 to 15 chaos each week 1, like day 1, day 2, day 3. And so that is a pretty good investment because that is a 20, once you get both of those rings with those catalysts, that is 20% more damage. An incredible power gain for such a low cost, in my opinion. So maybe you want to go for some higher life, some higher resistances on those, but that is our next best step. Now for your boots, right out of the axe, we're just going to use 3-step assaults. These are perfect for Raider, super budget, and it just synergizes perfectly with our build. And then later on, when Atziri's steps becomes more affordable, I would recommend getting those or moving on to boots with life and resistance and movement speed. Just if you're having trouble balancing those, I would recommend getting that. Now, for your belt, I would do a Stygian or a Rustic Sash. I would start off with a Rustic Sash because of that global fizz damage increase and then try to get some life and res. I would use essences or something. For both the Stygian and the Rustic Sash, I would do essences. You can't do like a life essence for belt, I don't think, but you can do resistance essences. And we're going to try to make something usable for now. And then if you do Stygian, get a Abyssal Jewel with maybe some life, some fizz damage to spells, cast speed, anything beneficial. We are going to scale with cast speed, like I said, when we get these Architect's Hands. And then, so yeah, that'll be great. Now, after that, it's really time to move on to unique flasks at that point or get the Architect's Hands. But if you get the Architect's Hands, we have to get that Tinker Skin. So the Tinker Skin, do not be baited into buying a 5-link Tinker Skin. You know what? You know, if you're buying a 5-link Tinker Skin, you know what you're doing. You are just getting flipped. Someone is buying a Tinker Skin and just using a Jeweler's Touch on it and selling it for like a 10 to 20 chaos upsale on you. So what you want to do is buy a Jeweler's Touch Prophecy, use a Jeweler's Orb on a non-6-socketed Tinker Skin and get that 5-link Tinker Skin. And that's your 5-link. And then we're gonna get the Architect's Hand, get that Eldritch Battery, and then we're good to go. After you have that full setup, you are ready to pump some bosses. We're probably in the early acts still gonna use Diamond Flasks because we are really crit starved, super crit starved as Raider, especially after the changes. So Diamond Flask is what we'll probably use on a budget. But then you want to get an Atziri's Promise, a Wise Oak, and a Taste of Hate. These are going to be... The issue is with GGG's patch, the GGG nerf patches, I guess what I'll call it, is that there really isn't a benefit. Since we're already going to be elemental ailment immune right into the maps, there is really no benefit for us to do defensive flasks, in my opinion, because they are just always going to be down. Like, who in the world is going to be able to perfectly time their quartz flask that is super nerfed, or their jade flask or something for the perfect time? Like, I see projectiles coming, time to hit my jade flask. Yeah, no, no, no way. We're just going to use unique flasks and save them for the map boss. Save them for the map boss and save them for bosses. And these will be pretty comparable to old diamond flasks. It's definitely not close, but it is going to give us, it is going to be comparable. And then after that, a divine life flask with panicking and corrupted blood immunity. And then also a quicksilver with, like, I guess I would recommend increased duration, or maybe we go rock gut now. That is going to be up in the air. It's not really that important, whichever one you choose. But we don't really get benefit from rock gut, to be honest. So I would probably just do a quicksilver with increased duration. So jewels, we're going to be grabbing unstable payloads. Those are super budget. I don't know about this league. I really just don't know about this league. But if you can't get unstable payloads for cheap, I would recommend just cobalt jewels with increased max life, because we are kind of life starved early on with all these uniques. Even though these uniques are good for us for life, Raider is just in a very tough spot. We don't have much increased max life with this build, and so getting some cobalt jewels with increased max life is really good. Maybe get someone with cast speed, trap damage, fizz damage, spell damage, um, and those will be good to put in those jewel sockets. So yeah, that's about it for this. It's going to be well more covered in the Google document. It's going to contain trade links to everything, and it's going to be explained really well, I hope. And so let's go ahead and move on to the path of buildings now. Hi everyone. So I wanted to go ahead and go over the elephant in the room, and that is, how is this build going to do after the nerfs? So basically, like I explained earlier, explosive trap is extremely inaccurate in path of building. That is because of the, I believe, I've heard it's because of all of the additional explosions that explosive trap has. So we have our explosive trap helmet. We have our the explosive trap. What it does in the beginning is it has 8 smaller explosions and then AoE overlap. So explosive trap has a AoE overlap breakpoint. I'm not sure what these breakpoints are, but I basically have scaled a little bit of AoE, and there are some ways that I plan on scaling AoE more to hit this breakpoint. But that is going to be very high budget. It is too much investment to reach the AoE breakpoints that I do want to eventually hit. Now, I will hit them, but it is going to take higher investment. But that is not the purpose of this guide. I'm not talking about 30 Exalt crafts right now. We are talking about getting into bosses as low budget as I can. Not just getting into bosses, but destroying bosses. So, anyway, because of this, I have done a lot of video recording. I have done a lot of Path of Exile database research. I have calculated it to as best as I can, because I'm not sure how to calculate it. It is a limitation of my brain, I guess. But anyway, in the end, what I've discovered is that I take this DPS and the full DPS, I multiply it by about 2.8 to 3 to 3.5 is the most accurate that I've been able to come up with. I think 3.5 is definitely when most conditions are met. So if the boss is cursed by flammability and assassin's mark, and if the boss is getting nuked by my flamethrower trap, if it's standing in my flamethrower trap and bear trap, we are getting ignite, burning, bear trap, damage increase taken. We are getting that curse effectiveness. And so when those conditions are met, we originally in Ultimatum were able to do about 30 to 30 point to 35 plus million Cyrus DPS. Now, let's start talking about the nerfs. So I'm going to go one by one over GGG's nerf hammer. So Diamond Flask, dead. We no longer use Diamond Flask except in the very beginning for a very budget setup. We're going to be switching to Wise Oak. So Wise Oak, we are already dropping 1 million DPS times 3 times 3.5, whatever you look at it. And let's go ahead and also put in I've already nerfed the unique flask down to 3.15 values, so we don't have to worry about that. But we are not unnerving anymore from Blade Blast, so that goes away. And then It's time to put in the GGG Nerf Hammer Jewel. So this thing is going to keep into account consecrated ground, no longer giving 100% increased crit strike chance. We are no longer getting that extra 50% onslaught effect. We still have 130% though. We are no longer getting 10% reduced cast speed or 10% increased cast speed from Arcane Surge. We still have Arcane Surge, guys. Um, Arcane Surge we get from here. This was unchanged. Pyrotechnics, Arcane Pyrotechnics was not changed in patch notes. So we are still going to be getting, this is massive. This is absolutely incredible that we get to keep Arcane Surge when it's been so messed up for so many builds. So this is absolutely incredible that we were able to keep this multiplier. But yeah, so because of that, I have it put in right now. So if they took away Arcane Surge from us, we would be down another like 3+ million DPS. But here we go. We have our Arcane Surge, and so we are good to go. We still use Zealotry. Anger is terrible for this build. You can put it in a path of building yourself, but Zealotry is going to come out ahead. And we combine that with our Watcher's Eye for our crit chance against enemies on consecrated ground. That still does work. That is not out of the game. So we are going to make up some loss of crit from that. But anyway, let's put in the GG Nerf Hammer. So we're down to 7.6 after that. So with our Nerf Flasks, with our GGG Nerf Jewel, with our loss of a nerve, this is what we're sitting at. Now, the problem is Arcanist brand. Are we going to be able to maintain Arcanist brand? I've been debating ways that we can try to maneuver around this if life tap is going to be too expensive. I'm not sure how it even works. It's very confusing that this is even put into the game in the first place because we definitely cannot maintain the mana cost of these abilities. 32 mana, 33, 52 for flammability. So life is going to be how we have to do it. But so maybe a level 1 life tap. I don't think it actually has anything to do with it. But anyway, I'm still debating how we're going to do this. If we can't do this, we are just going to have to do a ring with Assassin's Mark or a ring with Flammability, and we're going to have to self-cast Assassin's Mark. So that is just the harsh reality of things. I will update this as it goes, but we really do need to get this Assassin's Mark out. That is an absolutely absurd amount of damage. You see that go down from 7.6 to 5.4 million. It is so necessary that we get this Assassin's Mark out. Less necessary for flammability, so it won't be too big of a deal if we have to drop that, but it could be the case. Now, I do want to go over what the damage is at now. So what is our damage after these nerfs? So if we take our handy dandy calculator, like I said in the past, we need to go over the ranges. So what I'm expecting, if we at the low end of our effective DPS, we're going to be doing about 21.28 million Cyrus DPS now. At the very max high end, I would expect us to do about 30 million plus still, which is very, very nice, but that's rarely ever going to happen, except on bosses that stand still and we can pre-trap. But usually it will be at around 22.8 with this full setup. But on bosses like the Feared and stuff, it is going to be very, very rough. So we're going to be sitting around 7.6, and sometimes we're going to be seeing 3.8 million DPS, which is going to be very, very not good for the Feared if it gets extremely hectic. Now we can overcome this by just pushing out more DPS. But that's just gonna how it's gonna be. I'm looking forward to seeing who can push the Feared solo. I'm really curious to see who's gonna be able to do that. But anyway, if we drop it further, that is going to be our burst, I guess you could say. If we drop our unique flask, we're still going to be pretty healthy. So I'm not too worried about flaskless gameplay. As you see, we will need to fix that cold res, though. That's my fault for not optimizing the gear set. But, 6.3 times 3, we're still going to be doing 15, 18 plus, 20 plus million Cyrus DPS. Now, for this gear set, this is the final form of the budget, not budget anymore, because Tinkerskin Slave Drivers, 6-link, and Slave Drivers, I have no clue how this is going to go, but I am going to have to push these if I want to do the kind of boss farming that I want to do. But anyway, we have a Vendor Wand. We added some crit. I'm hoping to at least add some crit on this by the time I go to boss farming. We have made a Spirit Shield that we'll go over later. Actually, I'll just go over this in a second because this is very similar gear. But basically, we have the Arn's Anguish Cloth Belt, which is from Maven. It's usually very cheap, but Tinkerskin or slave drivers generates endurance charges quite often when you're throwing a lot of traps, and this is going to give us brutal charges, which, if you want to see what brutal charges do, look at this DPS. Absolutely absurd how much DPS we get from brutal charges. It is a triple damage multiplier when we do get those charges. Very underrated belt, extremely strong. And the Circle of Anguish is a very cheap version. The implicits on this are terrible. Herald of Ash, and also it's a cheap version of the ring. It's just the Herald of Ash reduce res and Herald of Ash increase buff effect. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and go over the other POBs. So going over the leveling POB. I have been testing various leveling methods, and I have found that Explosive Trap is not good for leveling. Now, I was able to do a 2 Act 10 run in about 4.5 to 4, like it was like 4 hours, 50 minutes or something, but it was a little painful when the damage took a massive drop off. After Act 7 or Act 8, it was pretty pitiful, and the reason for that is because we don't get scaling from our wands with Explosive Trap. The wand recipes that you do in the axe are just not very impressive at all with Explosive Trap. And so because of that, I think I'm going to have to recommend Lightning Trap for leveling, because we can abuse those lightning flat spell damage wands. And so that's going to be very, very, very nice for us. So it's going to go, this POB is going to go all the way through Act 10. The reason Lightning Trap is so nice is because we do get this projectile node. And if we go through here, we can pick up these projectile nodes here, which we can respec later. We're going to get some pierce. It's going to feel really, really good for leveling, especially just make sure you maintain those lightning spell damage, or lightnings to damage to spell wands. You make sure you get those vendor recipes. But anyway, it's going to have an early mapping set up too for when we are doing early mapping with Lightning Trap. And then we're going to spec over to Explosive Trap once we get our, like I said a while in the crafting guide, once we get those +1 fire wands and stuff like that, you can go ahead and spec over to Explosive Trap. But it's going to be detailed in the Google Doc, so make sure you check out the Google Doc, okay? Anyway, like how we said, we're going to be switching to Architect's Hand. I do have our Architect's Hand set up. This will be it right here. It's going to have all the items here for you, as well as we went over how to craft everything in here, but it's going to be here for you to look at. And then we have our budget bossing set up. So, oh wait, I just looked at that. Okay, so it's going to be 3 POBs. We're going to have the leveling POB, the oh, this must be level 83. Okay, so it's going to have this. This is going to be level 83 mid maps to tier 16s. Like, going to be pushing tier 16s with this. Pretty nice life at 4.2 with a lot of dodge. When we're in tier 16s, your effective life should be in a decent range, 22, 88, 101k, 79k. I think this will feel fine compared to a lot of other ascendancies. Maybe not for a new player, obviously this could be frustrating, but for a lot of experienced players, this is all you need for softcore. So and then we move into the boss farm that I went over before. So it's going to be 4 path of buildings that I've made for you guys. Sorry, I'm losing my voice right now. It's been a really long past few days. But yeah, there it is, and just check out the Google Doc. I will be updating that Google Doc constantly, so make sure you keep up to date on that. Hey everyone, Spicy Sushi here. Just to end the video, I want to let you know that I do have this Google Doc. This is a very important document to keep up with before league start. I have not done with it, like I said, but I'm going to be working on this very, very hard for the next 3 days. I think I have. I don't even know what day it is at this point. Wednesday. So I'm gonna be working on it today, Thursday. So 2 days. I'm gonna work on it for 2 full days. I'll be putting work into this, updating the leveling guide. Like I said, I think in the POBs, we have Lightning Trap, I think is what I'm going to try to go for. I think I'm revamping Lightning Trap here. So yeah, so I'm going to be revamping the leveling guides, revamping the item progress guides. This is not complete, but I do recommend that you hop in the Discord for this Google Docs. It's the easiest place for me to put updates and communicate with people. And I'm going to be updating all the POBs through here. If there's ever a change in the league, this is where I'm going to come first, because I'm easily able to update it from here. So and I will post in Discord whenever there's an update to the Google Doc. I'm not going to ping everyone, but I am going to have a Discord channel where I type that I did updates to it. So I do recommend hopping in the Discord and coming to check out the Google Doc if you want to know item progression, as well as the um, Q&A is what I'll do here, leveling guide, all that stuff. All right, well, I'll see you guys later. Please consider subscribing. I put so much work into this guide, and anyway, I hope you guys have an amazing league start, and good luck. Good luck in 3.15 Expedition.